Welcome to Our Future is Kind, a podcast exploring how we build the future we want to live in, one kind act at a time. I'm your host, Michael G. Neece, president of Our Future is Kind, and your trusted companion as we search out kindness strategies we can use in our everyday lives. Together, as we chase the idea of building a kinder future, we will interview experts in kindness, team building, human motivation, corporate culture building, relationships, plus politicians, artists, and those with a vision for a healthy and kind future, one we all want to live in and deserve to enjoy together. In addition to interviews, we will consider positive depictions of humanity's future in art, literature, the movies, and media. And we will issue kindness challenges each week, give an update about Our Future is Kind, the company, and what it's doing to stay true to its mission. So, let's dive in. Before we start this episode, just a quick reminder about the Human Summit. It's a movement focused on connection over division, kindness over judgment, and empathy over apathy. If you want to learn more, check out www.thehumansummit.com/home. As one of the co-founders of this Human Summit, I'm so excited to tell you just a little bit about it. Co-founder Kevin Hunting and I have put this together with an amazing board of advisors, and we can't wait to share it with you and the rest of the world. Check it out now and reach out to us if you have any questions. Today's guest is none other than Brendan Bernat. He is a program manager, writer, speaker, and team leader. For over 2 decades, Brendan has been serving as a financial association professional. His writing has appeared in a variety of publications, including Broker World magazine. Brendan, welcome to the program.
Michael, thank you so much for inviting me. It's great to be here.
I'm happy that you said yes. I think we've had some really good discussions in the past about kindness and really what it means to you. But let's start with first things first. Can you tell all of our listeners and viewers just a little bit more about what makes you, you?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So I am a lifelong Northern Virginia, born in Washington, D.C., and right down the street from Washington, D.C. in Northern Virginia. I went to elementary school at Sleepy Hollow Elementary with our host, Michael Neece, and so have stayed in the region all of my 52 years, and I am the father of 5 children and married to the love of my life as well. As Michael mentioned, I am in the association management space, and I've been there since graduating from George Mason University with a degree in history.
And with that, you have been in spaces where there has been a lot of kindness, I hope, and certainly some moments of unkindness. Just to help everybody understand you a little bit better, what does kindness mean to you?
Well, I mean, to me, kindness comes down to how you treat people, as well as respect. So it's a combination of things. And it's interesting, when I first heard from you about the concept for this podcast, I thought, well, why kindness? And I realized that I think a lot more about happiness. Especially the happiness of myself and my family, more than I think of kindness. And then I realized, well, wait a minute, happiness is inwards. Happiness is how we're feeling, how we're doing, but kindness is more other focused. And it comes down to how you treat others. And so I thought, well, this is great, because we all do need to be more other focused. We need to treat others as we would like to be treated, even better than we would like to be treated. And so I think kindness is an outstanding topic. And one thing I thought about is, sometimes in the workplace, I've heard before, well, are you tough enough? Or are you a marshmallow? And, what a kind of a toxic way to talk about kindness, as if it's a very negative thing. And so it's nice to see you, Michael, presenting on the topic of kindness as something desirable. I mean, I was listening to the radio the other day, Uncle John's band, right? What do they ask in that song? Are you kind? Which I think is fascinating. And so, I think also the journey is as important as the outcome. And so how do you get to the results that you're seeking to to achieve, and the way you get there is through kindness.
I think you hit on a word that I really want to get back to, which is journey. It's this whole idea of we're in this big trip of life together, right? And so finding ways of enjoying each other, finding ways of enjoying ourselves, and feeling whole and feeling okay. Tell me about, kindness in the workplace. I mean, do you find that it's prevalent throughout your career, where you've seen a lot of it? Just tell me about your experience of kindness in your workplace and in prior workplaces.
I've been in the workforce since 1995, so I have seen everything, well, almost everything. I've seen examples of both, and I think that when we go to the workplace, we should bring kindness with us, and that includes kindness to ourselves. One example of one thing that I've seen is that I learned a bad habit, which is when you're working in a physical location, in a physical office with other employees, that if you have direct reports, to bring them into your office and close the door. And there's something so ominous about that. And maybe they haven't done anything wrong. Maybe everything's fine, but it's like,
Sure.
oh no, why does the boss want to see me? And I realized that one way to show kindness to your staff is to eliminate that fear from their lives, right? So it's no longer, am I in trouble? It's you create a physical atmosphere. Maybe you just go out for a cup of coffee and you discuss what you want to discuss in a more open forum. Now, there are situations in which you need to have privacy, but I think that those situations are few and far between. And so that's one thing I've learned about kindness in the workplace, is that you need to, really avoid making your team walk on eggshells. So that's one thing that I've observed. And in terms of experiencing kindness, I mean, in so many different ways, it reminds me, I had a direct supervisor one time that says, well, we don't do staff meetings, department meetings. So, if I need to talk to you, I'm going to find you and we'll talk. We'll just go talk. And to me, that was just, who likes going to a staff meeting, Michael? What a wonderful way to show kindness. And I guess that the equivalent these days is if you have something on your Zoom, on your Outlook, and all of a sudden it gets canceled last minute and you get an hour back. That happens too, and people enjoy that. But what a way to show kindness is to give people back some time as well. Because there's one conference that I went to one time, a business conference, and I remember that I was an attendee at this conference, and they actually built downtime into the schedule. And they just gave people an hour just to go sit on the veranda, check their email, do whatever they wanted to do. And I thought that was a very kind way to structure a meeting as well.
Well, that's putting themselves into the shoes of people who are going to participate, which you have to applaud anybody who's that great an event planner. But I love the idea of not having staff meetings in terms of, I have had situations where I've been to a staff meeting, and you have all of these sort of coded terms where your supervisor is saying something about, and let's all please remember that, one of the policies that we have, and that person is speaking to like one other individual in the room, but they're afraid of having that conversation. So that's, I mean, the whole idea that you don't have to sit through that and know that it was, George or Frank or Susie or whoever that, okay, they tripped that particular tripwire, and now we're all getting a talking to on their behalf.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you praise in public. You what's the opposite of praise, right?
Criticize.
Criticize in private.
Yeah.
But some of this comes down to just courage as a leader and a manager as well. That you're willing to, have that uncomfortable conversation with one individual. If it wouldn't necessarily benefit the entire team. That's an excellent point.
Yeah, and you mentioned the word courage. One of the things that you and I have talked about in the past, and you said it to me and it was really striking, was that we should think about darkness, and we should think about moving away from it. Do you remember that comment? And if so, do you remember what you meant by that?
Yeah, I do remember that, and I'll start by saying that I don't have, the market cornered on darkness or sadness. Every life contains disappointment. Every life contains failure. And I remember watching a short video by the writer and speaker in the 20th century, Alan Watts. And Alan Watts used the allegory of the yin and yang symbol, and he compared it to two fishes. And he said, if you completely remove the darkness part of this symbol, then you're left with nothing. It's like two fishes eating each other, but if one succeeds in completely consuming the other one, then all you're left with is a big white background and a dot in it. And so I think that there's a lot of wisdom in that we shouldn't expect that our lives aren't going to have suffering. We shouldn't expect that they're not going to have disappointment. But it's how we deal with them. One of my favorite books is Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. And if you read the book, you'll notice that every single time something really bad happens, he says, "So it goes." And I thought, wow. I thought, he paints kind of a bleak picture at times, but then I realized, it goes the other way too. Good things happen as well. And we never should lose sight of that fact that it goes the other way as well, and that life isn't just so it goes. Sometimes it goes extremely well in addition to that. And then in that vein, I find that a lot of the darkness that I've experienced, I've actually imposed upon myself. It's been self-imposed. It had to do perhaps with my perception of events. And I'll tell a story. Back in the 1990s, I graduated college, and there were a few jobs I really wanted. One in particular. And, try it as I might, I couldn't get into this industry. I couldn't get this job. And I was so frustrated and so despondent and so upset. And I had tunnel vision. I didn't yet understand that the world is full of possibilities. And for me to say, well, if I don't do X, Y, Z, I'm a failure in my mid-20s, that's just so short-sighted. And that just showed a lack of perspective and wisdom. And so I once heard a quote from a fellow at an industry conference, and he kept saying, if I apply for the part, right, he was a Broadway singer. He was the tenor in The Lion King on Broadway. He said, if I apply for a part and I'm driving home wondering if I'm going to get it, I say to myself, if I don't get that part, it's not my service to give. And I move on to find what is my service to give. And so that's an example of sometimes our mindset can be our own worst enemy, and we can create darkness where it doesn't need to exist necessarily. What is happiness is the opposite of this darkness. I think it comes down to managing your fear, plus gratitude. We just talked about that. Plus purpose. Why are you here? What meaning do you give your life? And I think for me, those are my three recipes for happiness as an antidote to the darkness.
Oh, I love that.
Nature walks too. Don't hurt either, being in nature.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, nature bathing is one of my favorite things to do as well. We should go on a walk sometime together soon.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The concept of staying away from dwelling in darkness and trying to find ways of living in service. You mentioned that. You're talking about how we think of living in service. What I find is that most of us, we wake up, we have breakfast, get on the bus, go to work, do the work thing, get back on the bus, get home, make a dinner, and then go to bed. And we're not necessarily really mindful about how we are serving others or how we are building this future that is unfurling around us, whether we choose to or not. One of the really fun things that you've mentioned to me in the past is that, mindful or not, sometimes we just have these great experiences where kindness can kind of pay us back, right? Have you ever had an instance where maybe kindness has, like you've bubbled up some and it's just paid you back, or where you've seen it happen in the workplace?
I can think of a few examples of where that's happened in which kindness was certainly paid back. And one of them actually involved a former coworker. She wasn't with our organization for very long, and I didn't think that she was with us for long enough for me to develop much of a working relationship with her. But she got another job, and she happened to be working with a family member of mine later on. and she said, "Oh, she said, Brendan, she said, I had such a great time working with him. He really inspired me. He really made me happy." And, I had no idea. I hardly remembered this person, but years later I found this out. Now, believe me, there's plenty of people who probably have had a negative experience with me. I'm far from perfect, but in this case, it was nice that this person had good memories like that. I'll tell you, in other circumstances, there was a program that I managed. It was actually an awards program, and it was taken on by two of my colleagues. And later on, they had done some work on the program. They had made some edits to it, some changes, and they were speaking in a staff meeting about this program and about how, some of the changes they had made to it. And I stood up and I said, I just want to congratulate you because I'm very familiar with this program, and you've taken this, I don't know, this Buick, and you've turned it into a Ferrari. And I said that only because I meant it, because I thought they deserved public praise for the work that they had done. And a few years later, I had the opportunity. I really needed a change in my work life, and I needed kind of a lateral move. And they wanted that. They actually, when the opportunity came up for me to join their team, they were instrumental in making that happen. And so I think that's an example of an act of kindness that did not have an ulterior motive, but it did come back to me as well.
Well, it's those moments, right, of just trying to humanize each other. Like you said, you felt their work deserved some sort of public praise. For all of these leaders that you and I have met throughout the years who say, well, emotions, they have no place in work, and we shouldn't, this is all fuzzy, fluffy stuff. Why do we have to focus on this? But what they find time and time again from their surveys is that people want words of praise. They want bonuses. They want different ways of acknowledgement that what they've done is great. So I just love your example, the fact that you were, a colleague who just wanted to make sure that your other colleagues heard some good words about their great work. So
thank you. And Michael, what you just said, they want the feedback. They want the positive affirmations. I think everybody walks through life with a little bit of concern about, well, how am I doing here? Is my job safe? Am I doing an okay job? And so when you get that kind of feedback, what a wonderful way just to make you feel better about yourself and feel more safe and secure, which is what we all want to feel.
For sure, yeah. What I've found on any team that I've ever led or been a part of, as soon as the communications drop to near zero, you start filling in the narrative. And that narrative can get pretty scary, especially if there are hard economic times around you. So leaders out there, I hope you're taking some notes from Brendan, because these are some great tips of how to make sure that people can recognize each other and buoy each other, especially when it gets a little scary out there. If you're willing, I want to take you down a path that I try to take all of our guests down. Our Future is Kind is a podcast that really tries to focus on a couple of things. And one of those big things is we want to establish a target for what the future should look like, what we hope that it can be. Because if you don't establish a target, you go on autopilot and you get on the bus, go to work, do the work thing, get on the bus, right? You just forget that we are building a future. So you have to develop that target in order to hit that target. So go with me on this little journey. It is now 2125. And humanity has done all the right things for the last 100 years. We've done everything we can to make a big, bright, wonderful, beautiful future. What do you hope that future looks like?
What a question. 2125, you said. Well, that's hopefully that's enough time to make some really profound changes for the better. That's 100 years. So I'll say I have a vision of utopia, and I don't know how to get there, but one vision of utopia that I have would be a world in which children are not severely ill, or a world in which children are not harmed. And sometimes we hear these horrible stories, and it occurs to me, unfortunately, that happens, and we're not aware that it's happening, but somewhere it's happening. And I'd like to live in a world in which children just feel safe, all children. And so that's something that's a dream of mine. I'd like to see that there in 21-25. The other thing I'd like to see, and I guess that starts with individual people making the right choice. And speaking of individual people, I'd like to see a way that as a species we choose kindness over ugliness. I'd like us to resist the urge to make ugliness viral. And I'll give you an example of that. My wife's name is Karen, and I think name shaming shows how unkind a society can be. And it can be unkind one anonymous poster at a time, one person at a time, making this thing go viral. It's difficult, if not impossible, to legislate that away, but we can all make the choice. We can say, I'm not going to use the name Karen in that way. I'm going to make an individual choice not to do that. And I hope that the reasons that would make people be, people make that viral without even realizing that it's not a nice thing to do. And I think that hopefully in the future, we're going to be a bit more self-aware and choose kindness on an individual basis so that sort of thing isn't perpetuated. It has to start with me. One way to do that is to question our own perspective. I remember I was driving in my neighborhood the other day, driving my kids to school, and there was a car in front of me, and he just kept yielding. He just stopped in the middle of the road. And then somebody came perpendicular to us, stopped at the stop sign, ready to make the right turn, and he's still yielding. And I'm thinking, dude, don't you know you don't have to yield? She has a stop sign, you don't. You can just make your left turn. And I told that story to my wife later, and she said, Brendan, there's two big cones that you probably couldn't see from your perspective, if you recall, on that other side of the road that's blocking a lane. This guy couldn't make that left turn until she got out of the way because there's only one lane of traffic there with the construction. And I thought, oh, you're absolutely right. Like I was, and I was absolutely sure that this guy was just being a fool. And so I think that we really need to question our perspective. We need, that's an example of temporary insanity where I thought I knew all the facts and clearly I didn't. My perspective was wrong. And so, we should also listen to our wives more. That's the other story. But, there's a quote that I love, which is you cannot reason someone out of something that they didn't reason their way into. And that comes down to perspective, right? And questioning our own perspective. And, this also has to do with upbringing as well. Well, I can tell you it is possible to reason your way out of something that you weren't reasoned into. But I've done this, but it takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot of research and a lot of openness to question everything. And so that's my very, somewhat detailed vision of where I'd like us to go in the future as a species.
I love the fact that you dug in with children first, that was where you went. Because I know you're a father, I'm a father, and when I was a school teacher and didn't have kids yet, I was thinking about kids and what is their experience in the world. So I love the idea that they are not fearful and they are not harmed in any way, that they feel safe. I think that's a really great part of the answer. The other piece, we don't always know all the facts. We don't always know exactly what is going on in somebody else's world. And I'm glad that you hit on that because it does take great courage to try to unearth those other facts and find out we were wrong and have that be okay, have it be understood. Have you ever encountered somebody who just does not like to be wrong and doesn't want to find out what the other perspectives are? Like they're just going to be right no matter what, darn it. They're just going to do it.
Yes, all the people I used to argue with on Facebook in 2015. And then I learned that Facebook does not pay me to argue with strangers. And all it does is bring my blood pressure up and waste my time. So I stopped doing that. So
that's smart. That's a great advice for everybody tuning into this podcast. So, establishing what the target looks like, establishing what our future looks like, you went to children, which if you go 100 years in the future, I have a 20-year-old. So going 100 years in the future, we're talking about my daughter's children, so our grandchildren. That's really what we're getting into. In order to get to this better future, I said, okay, let's pretend that humanity is just doing all the right things.
Yeah.
that we've got it right. We've nailed it every time, and we've now got this utopia. You've also mentioned the word courage at least a couple of times during this podcast when it comes to being kind. It takes some courage. So what are those courageous acts of kindness that it's going to take to get into that future?
Well, it's going to take, again, at the beginning of this, I talked about the difference between happiness and kindness. And so it's going to take not just pursuing our own happiness, but that of others as well. And that can look all kinds of, I mean, I remember back, I'm old enough to remember Kmart, when Kmart was around, and you'd see people that would actually go to Kmart before Christmas, and they would pay off people's layaways, random strangers, because, you know, if it's Christmas time and you've got $150 worth of Christmas presents of toys on a layaway, well, you know what that means, Michael. That means that you're breaking your back to give Christmas to your kids, and you're going into debt to do it. And so that's an example of one way to be kind. My daughter does the Angel Tree project before Christmas, where she'll adopt a child, and we'll give presents through the Angel Tree program, which I thought was and a similar idea as well to what I was talking about with the old Kmart. And so I think it's got to start with me. It's interesting. One candidate for president a long time ago, many decades ago, campaigned on there's too much traffic on the road. People are, it takes too long to get home from work. And I said, oh, yes, I agree. And I said, well, what's the government going to do about that? How are they going to fix that? And you know what finally, you're reading my mind as I say this, you know what finally kind of fixed the problem, at least for a while, was something horrible, COVID, right? That was so devastating.
Right.
But that's something, it was a mix of technology and opportunity that solved this. And so, some of this stuff is not something we can legislate. Some of this is something that we just need to make the choice as individuals to do better and do for others.
Thinking about how we treat our fellow human beings as we all are on this journey together. Yeah, that's a great way of thinking about it. What is your thought on when we don't get it right? And if you look back on your life and you say, gosh, in my 20s, I did this wrong. In my 30s, I did that wrong. How do you forgive yourself? How do you make peace with the fact that you weren't always right and you weren't always, a good employee or a good husband, father, whatever it is? How do you make peace with that and still stay kind?
Yeah, that's hard. That's a hard question, and it's something that's hard to do. And I don't have all the answers, but what you're really talking about is kindness to oneself is what you're really talking about. And I'll say as a parent, I now have 2 children who are 18 or older, and I have 3 other children that are not yet 18. And with one of my children in college, I'm beginning to experience some empty nest feelings, at least about that one child that's gone to college. And I am my own worst critic concerning mistakes that I've made in the past as a parent. And one thing that hits me especially hard is any opportunities that you've lost because you're out playing golf or whatever. You only have so much time with your kids when they're little. And once that time is gone, it's gone. You don't get it back. So all of you parents who have young kids and you want to go to the beach kid-free, like when you were younger, I get that. I know how that feels. I've been there. I've wanted that freedom back. But, think about your 9-year-old playing in the water. You can't see that, at least not in the same way when they're 19 or 29. But when they're 9, you can be there in the moment and you can experience that. And so I say appreciate the moments as a parent, live in the present with your kids, but realize you're going to make mistakes. It's just normal. There's a lot of good parents out there who are not abusive jerks, but have made mistakes, and they would handle things differently now. And so first of all, the fact that you recognize that means that you have grown. The fact that you say, well, I would have done that different 10 or 15 years ago, or even 2 years ago, means that you have grown. So celebrate that growth. And second of all, a business associate said something beautiful to me last year. I was in Arizona, and he said, bad dads don't feel guilty. Now, you could flip that on its head, right? You could also say good dads feel guilty. Sure. So, again, the fact that you have those feelings that you want to do better, that really means that you are a good person, but not a perfect person. So we've established you're a good mom or dad. You love your kids. You believe in treating them with love and kindness. Your kids know that too. And so they want you to forgive yourself and move on and be present for them in the current moment. Anthony Hopkins, the great actor, I guess he's Sir Anthony Hopkins, I believe. He says, expecting perfection of ourselves is a lie. He says it much more elegantly than I can, but that's the nature of the quote, that expecting perfection of ourselves, it's not just bad, it's not just impossible. He says it's a lie. That's how strongly he felt about that. And so I'll say that, my kids, they inspire me every day. They continue to inspire me. We have door-to-door solicitors that love to come to our no-soliciting neighborhood without a permit. And I'm not always very kind to them. And two of my daughters challenged me actually to be kinder to them. Oh, wow. And I've taken up that challenge. I'm living that challenge. And one of my daughters said, everybody, they're people first and employees second. And even if they don't have that solicitor's permit, or even if they're breaking the law, violating that misdemeanor, you still need to treat them with respect and kindness because they're people first and employees second. And so that really resonated with me.
And it's great that you have daughters who will call you on that stuff, and that you are the kind of person to hear that and heed that. I think it is so easy to say. I mean, I think earlier you had said that there's some resistance, right? Like, are you tough and firm, or are you a marshmallow, right? I think that was kind of the phrasing that you used. I think there's so many leaders in the workforce who are terrified of being seen as like a pushover. And all of these situations that you're describing takes an awful lot of courage and an awful lot of introspection. So I applaud your daughters. I applaud you for for having that stance. One other thing that I'm always curious about for any of our guests is, you go forth and you try to be kind, and you go forth and you try to live this great life, and an inspired life. So what are the things that inspire you, that get your juices flowing, that get your battery up to full charge so that you can go out there and do that? What inspires Brendan Bernat?
Well, I'll tell you one thing that inspired me last year was that Sleepy Hollow Elementary School reunion that you coordinated, Michael. So thank you for that. I'd always wanted to go back in the building and remember what it was like to be there as a grade schooler. So I found that very inspiring, catching up with you and so many of our classmates. And it reminded me of remember how we would go to a field trip, if we were going on a field trip to the National Air and Space Museum or somewhere like that, and we might have one class before the buses left, and that was music class. And we sang beautifully, didn't we, before those field trips? That really inspired us as kids. And so I like to take inspiration from the past, but not too much, because the present is the only time when anything's actually happening. So we can certainly become too nostalgic, so I try to guard against that. I have history. My degree is in history, and so it's easier for me to talk about what's inspiring me right now in February 2025. So baseball, late 19th century, early 20th century baseball is what I'm reading about right now as we head into baseball season, and learning about just how the game was back then, and how it was kind of a sport of rogues and very, very rough characters back then. So almost outlaw type characters. So I'm finding that very interesting. And I'm going to be playing baseball this summer and in the spring in a league. I haven't played organized baseball since I was a kid, so I'm really looking forward to that as well. Playing with a bunch of old people like myself, or older people. And, it's funny, I said to my wife, I said, sometime when the kids are all grown up, I would like to play baseball again. And she said, well, why don't you do it right now? I said, okay. So that was how that conversation went. Back to the 19th century, there's a painting by David Gilmore Blythe, and I invite your readers to Google David Gilmore Blythe and look up his prison, Libby Prison. Libby Prison was a prison for Union Civil War officers in Richmond, Virginia. It's an amazing painting. It's a very dark painting. And one of the prisoners is tacking to the wall a sign that says time. And then there's another one that's already on another post, another pillar that says retribution. And then there's a preacher pointing up at a lightning bolt, scrawled on the wall, this dark wall. And under that it says hope. And so to me, that's a tremendously powerful painting, and to think of what those soldiers were going through, and how there was actually one officer who was a preacher in that prison, because I did the research on it. And I can't tell you if David Gilmore Blythe knew this or not when he painted this painting, but the preacher actually was a POW, and he taught the soldiers how to sing the Battle Hymn of the Republic, and apparently he brought that to them. So that's very inspiring. Books inspire me. I just finished a book by Alex Cody Foster, who made his living as a ghostwriter, and then he decided that he was going to ghostwrite for John McAfee, the internet antivirus pioneer.
Sure.
And he wrote a book called The Man Who Hacked the World, which was extremely fascinating, because Alex Cody Foster goes into his own story, which is weird for a ghostwriter, I know, but he goes into his own story of some real bad stuff he had been through, and how it influenced him as a writer, how he became a professional writer, and then his relationship with the controversial John McAfee, who is now deceased. And so that was a very interesting book I just finished. Just a great writer and a great storyteller. The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien, classic American literature from the 20th century, having to do with the war in Vietnam. And we already talked about Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut, and a sleeper author who writes, he's deceased now, but Charles Bowden, a journalist who writes about the border with Mexico, a lot of stories about that. Very gifted writer. Anything that Charles Bowden has written is a treat to read. And he wrote a book called A Shadow in the City, which is kind of edgy, by Bowden. So I'll leave that to your readers if they might be interested. And music, just too eclectic even to go into details, but everything from country metal to classical, to the 90s music, 60s hippie music, as we talk about, and the smooth jazz of Chet Baker on a spring evening. So those are just a list of some of the things that inspire me.
I'm glad you brought Chet Baker into it. That's really fun. That's great. Yeah. There are so many great things that you have listed. We're going to put all of those in the show notes. So if anybody wants to go and get inspired by Brendan's list, I encourage you to go check those out. And we'll have links where you can get to Amazon and other places where you can find these things. But yeah, so Brendan, this has flown by. I can't believe that we've run out of time here. But are there any last big pieces of wisdom that you want to share? Do you want to tell us what you're up to next, other than playing baseball?
Well, I'll tell you that the spring is coming, and so for me, I've recently been working. I'm 52, as I mentioned, so I'm getting into middle age. Having conversations with my doctor about, you need to eat better, you need to exercise more. Who hasn't had that conversation with their doctor at our age? And so just really trying to put that into practice, looking forward to the beautiful spring that's coming. The older I get, the more into nature and just enjoying all the things that are free. And so that's what that's what I'm going to be working on this spring, is in addition to my work and my reading, is taking advantage of being in the moment with my family, and enjoying the loveliness of nature. And that's what I've got going on, Michael.
That sounds really fun. And if we can't enjoy our lives, then what are we here for? And the connecting with family is such a lovely thing. So I hope that I get to see you sometime later on this year. Maybe we can have another Sleepy Hollow Elementary School reunion with some of our fine classmates. The time that we got to spend together was so much fun, and the three planners with me, they also did a fantastic job. I just have to give them a shout out that, as much as I helped spearhead some of it, I also know that I could not have done it alone. So Brendan, thank you again so much for appearing on Our Future is Kind.
Thank you for inviting me, Michael. It was a pleasure.
This episode's Kindness Challenge. Reclaim your courage. This week, practice the kind of courage that Brendan describes. First, the courage to be kind without needing recognition. And second, the courage to forgive yourself for past missteps. Try this. Offer genuine praise to someone without any agenda. Reframe a past mistake as proof of growth. Catch yourself judging someone and pause. Choose to see with fresh eyes. Want to stay inspired so you can be kind? Brendan draws inspiration from books, music, nature, and his children. His reminder? Bad dads don't feel guilty. If you're feeling guilt, regret, or worry, remember that's a sign you care. Enjoy the following pieces of art. First, the book, Slaughterhouse-Five. Second, a painting, Libby Prison by David Gilmore Blythe. And third, listen to the haunting trumpet of Chet Baker on a spring night. As you enjoy any of these, ask yourself the simple question, am I choosing kindness today? Thanks again for listening to Our Future is Kind podcast, a podcast in search of a kinder future. Go out there and do something kind.